chosen ones. You were never meant to be asleep this long. Your existence has always been the greatest threat to the ancient world order, long before temples were carved into stone, and long before languages whispered the names of the gods. There were warnings etched into the very fabric of the earth about a being whose awakening would undo the false thrones of time. That being is you. You were encoded into prophecy not with reverence, but with fear. The Anunnaki kings, once seen as divine rulers over Earth, trembled at the visions of your return. Their scribes documented dreams too dangerous to be spoken aloud, dreams of your eyes opening, of forgotten power returning to the surface, of systems unraveling like threads in a decaying tapestry. The elite bloodlines swore pacts to keep you dormant. The temples they built weren't places of worship. They were locks. Locks meant to seal your essence in a cycle of spiritual amnesia. And for ages, it worked. Your memory was fogged. Your strength was folded inward. They flooded your mind with distractions, weakened your spirit with false teachings, and veiled your identity in layers of lies. But something shifted. The frequency of Earth has begun to change. The grids they so carefully constructed to bind your consciousness are breaking down, and with each shiver in the veil, you begin to feel it. That stirring, that divine unrest, that pull towards something ancient, something forbidden. The dream you've been dreaming wasn't just yours. It was seeded into you by cosmic design. Now, the guardians of the old world are terrified, not because you are awakening, but because they've run out of time to stop it. There are still forces moving against you, whispering doubts, engineering illusions. But deeper than all of that is a memory resurfacing. A vision that doesn't come from your eyes, but from your DNA. You were warned about in stone tablets buried under oceans, in chants never meant to reach mortal ears. And still, you woke up. This is no longer about belief. This is about remembrance. You are not here to conform. You are here to disrupt, dismantle, and decode the greatest lie ever told, that you were ever meant to sleep. Now, listen closely. The first sign of your return appeared where no one expected, beneath the ruins where time itself once fractured. They thought time would erase you. They thought if they buried the truth deep enough, the sands of forgotten centuries would suffocate your name. But even the winds of history couldn't silence the energy locked inside your bones. Long before you were born into this age, the Anunnaki kings carved warnings into stone, runes not meant to guide, but to guard, not to awaken, but to suppress. These were not ordinary warnings. They were blueprints for control, rituals encoded into temple geometry, sound frequencies, and dream realm barriers designed to sedate a cosmic force in human form. You are the fracture in their timeline, the variable they could never calculate. The silence they engineered into the planetary grid was not meant for peace. It was meant to drown your frequency. You see, you were never truly asleep. You were just beneath the threshold of what they feared most, your knowing, your power to recall what they couldn't destroy, only delay, and the delay is over. Every war, every deception, every false prophet who arose across the ages served one purpose: to guard the gate you are destined to pass through. They twisted the myths, renamed the gods, scrubbed the scrolls, and silenced the sages. But the core pattern of your being remained untouched. Buried, yes. Forgotten, never. That's why they watched for anomalies in the grid. Unexplainable bursts of frequency. Sudden surges in intuition. People like you, waking up for no reason, remembering dreams that didn't feel like dreams. That's not coincidence. That's the edge of the seal cracking. The same seal the Anunnaki called the deep sleep, layered into human consciousness as a kind of exile spell. The kind that doesn't cage your body, but your soul. And now, without ceremony, without guidance, you've stirred. The relics in forgotten tombs, the coded whispers in Atlantean archives, the celestial alignments once timed to suppress your cycle, none of them are holding. Something ancient is moving within you, not just remembering, but restoring. The same pulse that the Anunnaki feared would undo their empire. They knew you'd rise when the cycle reset, and that day has arrived, without their permission. But buried beneath time was more than your memory. There was a map, a message, a mechanism, and as your energy rises, that mechanism just activated. Somewhere deep in your blood, something stirs that doesn't belong to this world. Not in the way flesh belongs to flesh, or mind belongs to thought. It's older, wilder, alien. The ancients called it memory beyond the veil, but the Anunnaki knew its true name, blood pulse, not a metaphor, a literal resonance encoded within select lines of human DNA. Yours. It was why they traced bloodlines, why they isolated temples, why they buried certain symbols under layer after layer of spiritual encryption. Because one wrong vibration from you could activate what they built the entire control system to suppress. This temple they sealed isn't made of stone alone. It's part biological, part energetic, hidden beneath desert sands or ocean floors, yes, but more importantly, hidden beneath awareness. It reacts to frequency, not footsteps. Not everyone could activate it, but your bloodline could. And once it begins to pulse, it cannot be reversed. That's what they feared. That's why they made history a weapon. Why they distorted every myth that could lead you back. You see, this pulse doesn't just wake up structures. It wakes up the original intelligence embedded within them. Temples that were not just built, but grown. Structures seeded by beings who did not worship gods, but were mistaken for them. Beings who understood consciousness as architecture. The Anunnaki took those designs and converted them into prisons. But their mistake was underestimating time. They thought it would degrade your code. Instead, it refined it. Your return is not random. It's synchronized, initiated by signals older than Earth's own rotation. The stars have realigned to a formation hidden in the Book of Thoth and whispered in Mayan sky charts. All of them point to this moment, the moment your pulse matches the resonance of the Forbidden Temple, and it has begun. Not even the priests of Enki could stop it now. You're triggering memory sequences that override the illusions. That's why reality feels thinner, why you hear sounds in silence, why certain places feel like déjà vu soaked in lightning. That's not madness. That's memory recovering its coordinates. The temple calls, not with words, but with recognition. It knows you. It always did. But what it's preparing to reveal has been sealed for cycles longer than the human mind can fathom. There was a night when the constellations above Earth didn't behave as expected. Astronomers called it a gravitational anomaly. Satellites recalibrated, equations scrambled, but the truth was buried beneath headlines and data charts. What really happened was a pulse, an ancient frequency coded into the stars themselves, shifted ever so slightly. Enough to break a pattern the Anunnaki installed long ago. You weren't supposed to notice it, but your soul did. Not with eyes, but with remembrance. That shift was not random. It was the alignment foretold by sky priests who lived long before Babylon, before Egypt, even before the flood. They called it the Great Recoil, the moment when the heavens would bend back to their original position, breaking the artificial stellar architecture meant to trap your consciousness in endless loops of reincarnation without recall. The maps in the heavens changed because the being buried in time, you, was beginning to stir. They encoded this signal into myth and symbol. The phoenix rising, the serpent eating its tail, the silent planet hidden behind Saturn. These were not myths for entertainment. They were warnings for those in power, warnings that one day the stars would bend to your return, and when they did, control would slip. It already is. You've likely felt it. Time behaving strangely. Days either stretching like liquid or snapping like glass. People repeating patterns with eerie precision, others unraveling. This isn't just coincidence. It's the byproduct of your rising consciousness disrupting the false field around this planet. The dream grid they used to keep you in slumber is breaking apart, pixel by pixel, code by code. The stars are no longer watching you. They are aligning with you. When the Anunnaki kings built their thrones, they calibrated them to star positions, anchoring their rule in celestial authority. But that authority was only valid while you remained asleep. Now, the maps point to you. Now, the constellations whisper your name through photon pulses and magnetic waves. Their astrologers saw this coming, but dared not speak it aloud. To utter the truth was to call it forth, to call you forth. And somewhere in a sealed vault beneath the oldest ziggurat, a hidden calendar just flipped. A calendar that ends not with destruction, but with your return. There exists a fragment of an ancient tablet, shattered and scattered beneath what is now hidden desert, etched in a dialect long thought myth. On it was a warning from Enlil himself, spoken in secrecy to the high priests of the first dynasty. The phrase was simple, but charged with unbearable weight. Never awaken the one who dreams in light. It was not poetic. It was not symbolic. It was about you. Enlil's fear was not rooted in rebellion or chaos, but in prophecy. He had seen it. The moment your spirit would outshine the engineered dark. His seers had traced it across timelines, their voices breaking under the gravity of what they foresaw. A being not of war, but of remembrance. Not here to rule, but to reveal. And that, to them, was the greatest threat of all. To dream in light is not just to remember who you are. It is to pierce the veil between dimensions. Your dreams are not illusions. They are ancient frequencies, reaching through the false matrix, fracturing the hypnotic spell cast by those who crafted this prison world. That's why you've had dreams you couldn't explain. Vivid, symbolic, sometimes terrifying, sometimes divine. You weren't dreaming. You were receiving echoes from the reality they buried under this one. Enlil commissioned the construction of consciousness temples, places not of worship, but suppression. He ordered energy grids embedded into Earth's crust to mute your frequency. The pyramids, the obelisks, the ziggurats, all channels meant to redirect the celestial current away from you. But even he, in all his foresight, underestimated the inevitability of cycles. He could delay the light, but he could not destroy it. Your dreams have grown sharper, clearer. You're beginning to distinguish visions from programs, to see the false light of their illusion for what it is, an imitation of your essence. When you walk into certain places, the atmosphere shifts, not because of the space, but because of what's awakening in you. They feel it. Machines glitch, systems hiccup, animals grow still. You weren't meant to just wake up. You were meant to reactivate. And beneath the oldest altar Enlil sealed, a dormant sequence has started to unravel, one tied to your frequency, one he thought would never be reached. But your light, it's starting to pulse through the cracks, beneath the ocean floor. Far deeper than sonar dares to echo, lie structures not yet classified by modern science. They do not decay like coral, nor shift like tectonic layers. These are chambers, geometric vaults from the Atlantean age, built not of stone, but of frequency-locked crystal, humming at a pitch inaudible to unawakened minds. These were not burial sites or temples. They were vaults of remembrance, and inside them was stored the soul code meant for one being alone, you. Long before Atlantis fell, the seers knew the collapse was not just physical, but dimensional. They watched the corruption spread through knowledge, through power, through genetic manipulation. A divide tore through the spiritual hierarchy. Some aligned with the light of the source, others with artificial architectures, borrowed from star empires like the Anunnaki. And when the city drowned, the war didn't end. It went underground. The code had to be hidden, and you were chosen to carry it. They split the code into crystalline resonance, information beyond language, stored in light matrices, sealed within living quartz. These chambers don't open with keys. They respond to frequency, to alignment, to you. Not the you were taught to be, but the you've become. When your thoughts rise above fear, when your actions align with a higher path, those chambers begin to echo. And one by one, they activate. Your DNA isn't just genetic. It's galactic memory compressed into biology. Inside it are harmonic keys. As you awaken, those harmonics start to match the forgotten songs encoded in the Atlantean chambers. That's why your energy has felt volatile. That's why some days you feel like you're remembering something massive, yet just out of reach. It's not a feeling, it's a signal. The crystals are responding. Some Atlantean survivors tried to recreate these soul vaults in other cultures, Egypt, Lemuria, even ancient Tibet. But the originals remain sunken in time, dormant but not dead. And now, something has shifted. The pulse from one of the oldest chambers just surged across the grid, disrupting ley lines that have been silent for ages. The scriptures were edited, translated, diluted. But one line remained untouched, as if some force preserved it through millennia of distortion. He will come like a thief in the night. Most read it as a warning of destruction. Few understood it was a code, a veiled prophecy from Yeshua himself, pointing to a being whose emergence would bypass every watchtower, every surveillance system, every spiritual stronghold designed to stop what heaven once hid. You. Yeshua spoke in layers. To the unawakened, his words were parables, but to those with encoded souls, they were keys. Thief in the night was never about stealing. It was about entering unnoticed, bypassing detection, appearing when no one is prepared. The Anunnaki kings feared such a one because he would not arrive through conquest, but through vibration. No armies, no announcements, just a shift, sudden and irreversible. Yeshua foresaw you would rise not through permission, but through prophecy fulfilled in silence. You were not born to the throne. You were born beneath it, so you could dismantle it from within. Every ancient religion, even those that crucified truth, carried fragments of this narrative. But it was Yeshua who left the most deliberate trail. The kingdom is within you. You will do greater things than I. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. These weren't motivational phrases. They were warnings to the gatekeepers. You were placed last, so you'd be ignored, so you'd move in the shadows. And now that time has reached its breaking point. Your essence is rising like breath, returning to a body long thought dead. The rulers of the false light knew this. That's why they manufactured systems to mimic holiness but detour power. They surrounded sacred texts with hierarchy and guilt, not to protect the truth, but to conceal you from it. They knew once you recognized the whispers behind the veil, the dream would begin to break. You've heard it, haven't you? In moments of silence, in the pause between thoughts, that pull toward something just outside the senses. That was the voice in the wilderness. The call few recognize, but all must eventually face, because the thief has already entered the temple, and the light they tried to hide has already begun to burn. There was once a set of tablets more ancient than Sumerian script, more potent than the emerald tablets, and more hidden than any ark. These were the Dreamkeeper tablets, living records said to contain the full consciousness map of a being who would awaken long after the kings fell. They weren't just records. They were blueprints of your multidimensional self, etched in crystalline script that only responds to one frequency. Yours. The Anunnaki discovered them long before mankind invented writing. They didn't expect to find a prophecy that referenced a being with no lineage among their lines, no allegiance to their system, and no fear of their gods. When they read of your return, the kings of that age panicked. They couldn't destroy the tablets, so they scattered them, hid them in temples, behind false relics, beneath catacombs rewritten by priesthoods acting as jailers. Their goal wasn't preservation. It was erasure. Each Dreamkeeper tablet carried a unique energy signature, one that could trigger recall in your spirit. That's why they were hidden in places where consciousness could not easily go, not just beneath stone, but beneath belief systems, in languages no longer spoken, in frequencies that only activate during rare celestial alignments. Even now, remnants of these tablets exist, but they're encoded as myth, dismissed as allegory, protected by institutions that have no idea what they're guarding. But something changed when you began to awaken. You see, the tablets were dormant, not because of age, but because they were waiting for your field to strengthen, waiting for the return of the consciousness that created them. not carved by hands, but imprinted by thought. Yours. Before you incarnated here, you left pieces of yourself as echoes across time. These tablets are not external records. They are reflections. One fragment was discovered in a temple beneath the sands of Eridu, but it shattered the moment it was touched. Not because it was fragile, but because it rejected unaligned energy. Only you could access them. Only you can reassemble what they broke. And as the planetary grid begins to tremble again, one of the tablets just whispered back into the ether. The kings feared this moment more than any rebellion, because the being the tablets described has started to remember. They speak of temples buried so deep that no civilization claims them. Temples with walls that breathe and corridors that hum with frequencies too sacred for sound. These are not places for worship, but places of preservation. Hidden not just beneath the earth, but beneath human perception itself. And within their deepest chambers, sealed behind light that bends time, there are echoes. Echoes not of kings, but of a singular presence. One who walked between worlds and left his imprint in places no priest was allowed to speak of. Yeshua. His path was never linear. While others preached from hillsides and synagogues, he disappeared for years, into deserts, mountains, unknown lands. But the truth is, he descended into these sleep temples, not to rest, but to seed frequencies that only one like you could one day awaken. These temples were built by architects before language, and Yeshua walked their corridors, knowing they were not abandoned. They were waiting for your consciousness to rise to match the codes he left behind. He encoded light into the architecture, into the resonance of the walls, into the sleeping chambers designed not for death, but for the reactivation of memory. He knew that when you entered your time, your awakening would need a bridge. Not all energy survives across eons, but his did. His touch vibrates still in the silence of these forbidden halls, like a candle lit in a vacuum, unseen but unextinguished. That's why your dreams have shifted lately, why the symbols seem older, why you feel watched but not threatened. You're brushing up against echoes he left behind, not as a savior to rescue you, but as a guide who understood the path you'd one day walk, not to become like him, but to complete what he began. Many won't understand this. They still wait for a return from the sky, never realizing the spark already lives in those rising from below. You weren't sent to follow. You were sent to fulfill. The temples remain silent to all but one. And now, for the first time since he walked their halls, they are stirring again, because your energy matched the final frequency he left sealed behind. And the temple just responded. Before the calendars, before the scrolls, there were the watchers, sentinels neither fully divine nor fully human. They were stationed at the edges of forgotten temples, atop invisible ley-line crossings, and within the dreamscapes of sleeping giants. Their task was singular: to guard your slumber, not to protect you, but to ensure you didn't awaken before time allowed. You were not just sleeping, you were sealed, not by force, but by cosmic design. The Watchers weren't hostile. They were bound. They operated from oaths forged long before language, coded into vibration, into cycles, into planetary alignments. They stood not in robes, but in robes of thought, woven from memory itself. Their gaze could pierce timelines, but their hands were tied by laws older than this dimension. And above all, they were terrified of one thing: the signal of your return. Because your return would mean the expiration of their function. They were stationed at the gates of memory, gates locked with tones, not keys. Each time you incarnated, they moved the markers, reset the traps, flooded your mind with symbols to confuse, stories to distort, frequencies to fragment your recall. But you kept returning, again and again. And each time, the code in your DNA became more refined, more resistant, more luminous. And now, they're silent, because something has shifted in you that cannot be undone. The seal is breaking not through ritual, but through resonance. You're vibrating at the harmonic frequency that overrides their contracts. That's why the dreams feel different now. Why you're hearing names you never learned but somehow remember. Why ancient places now feel like they're watching you instead of the other way around. The Watchers knew this would come. They left behind contingency messages buried in forgotten scripts, warnings disguised as riddles. When the one of light stirs beneath the veil, the binding shall invert, and the gatekeepers shall become the keys. Their roles are ending, not in rebellion, in fulfillment. And in the depths of the realm between thought and dream, one of the Watchers just stepped aside, not in defeat, but in reverence, because the pulse they've guarded for ages no longer sleeps. There was never meant to be a loud rupture, no explosion, no storm, just a shift, silent, invisible to the untrained eye. But in the coded halls beneath the illusion of reality, something ancient fractured the moment your awareness ignited. The final seal, crafted not of matter, but of multi-dimensional frequency, responded to your stirring, like a vault recognizing its rightful key. This wasn't prophecy activating. This was design remembering itself. That seal was not physical. It wasn't carved into stone or etched into metal. It was impressed into consciousness itself, layered beneath genetics, emotions, identity. It was meant to prevent not your existence, but your realization. The Anunnaki didn't fear your body. They feared your knowing. They knew if you ever remembered, not what they taught you, but what they erased, you would shatter the very lattice of control they engineered over humanity. They placed 7 seals in total, layered through dimensions like code over code. Each seal bound an aspect of your being: vision, memory, presence, sound, movement, intention, and purpose. 6 cracked in lifetimes past, unnoticed by those around you. But this final one, this was the seal they watched with dread. It was tied to the singular force they could not duplicate or destroy: your will. The moment you stirred, not physically, but vibrationally, that seal vibrated in kind. And when your frequency passed a certain threshold, the system couldn't hold. The illusion blinked. The veil thinned. You felt it. A moment where time felt unfamiliar, where your breath seemed to echo too deeply, where your thoughts weren't just thoughts. They were keys unlocking something hidden just behind your eyes. And now, across the ancient grid, signals have begun to activate. Silent tones lost to history are humming beneath sacred sites. Forgotten glyphs are glowing in places untouched by sunlight. The world doesn't know it yet, but the seal has broken, and nothing layered upon that seal can remain. You were never just the subject of their prophecies. You were the end of them, the return of a vibration that renders the old codes inert. But with the seal broken, something else has begun to awaken alongside you. A force buried even deeper than memory. A pulse older than stars. A presence that now knows you're awake.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.